What's up? This is Peter Moeller with another take, and in this segment I'm going to be talking about the impact of the languages of the pre-Columbian Antilles. This is part of an ongoing topic out of all of the areas that concerns the Taino, which would include the archaeology, the DNA, and also the mythology. What intrigues the people and attracts the most curiosity is the language. Various Taino organizations today, they all give their takes and opinion in regards to the language. So this is something that we're going to review in this short video. Now, one of the first things that I want to put out there is the impact of colonization and first contact. One good example is in the island of Vizcaya, which the Spanish renamed Hispaniola. And we know this is divided today between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Now, what's most significant about this island is this is where we get the recordings of a lot of the practices and the religiosity. Now, on the other islands, we don't get too much recording because later on, this is like, for example, places like in Borigan, we get more references about the natives rebelling, because they find out what happened in islands such as Vizcaya, also in Cuba, of the mistreatment that's going on with the Spaniards and the native inhabitants of the island. So with this, we see the challenges with the language, because the Spanish did not record the document well the language. Or we just have reminiscences just to make connections. Like, for example, the word doqueta for many or much, right? That was recorded by Peter Martier. Now, the word doqueta is identical to the Colonial word doqueta, which is like pointing that there. So that's something that intrigued me. Another example we have is with the Watiao. The first references of the Watiao was in the year 1509 by Ponce de Leon, as he makes a pact with Awebana. And then later on, I believe it was Cacique Cotubanama. He also made the Watiao. I can't remember the name. I think the gentleman's name was Escoval. I don't remember the Spaniard's name, but I'll put this name in the subtitle in the video. And also with that, we find that the Colonial had the Watiao, and also in the Garifuna, they have Watian, okay? So all of these things that we're finding with the studies that we are all collectively doing with this language. Now, as far as day-to-day speech for the Taino, that's something that we don't have, because the Spaniards didn't record that, because Las Casas says they were only interested in learning phrases like bring the gold, take the food, and things like that. A good source for this that you can use is Jose Juan Aram's take on the antiquities of the Indians. There's a version in Spanish, and there's also a version in English. Both very good sources, references, what I just mentioned about Las Casas. Now, in regards with the language, what is left of the Taino. When we compare, we see that that the languages related to Taino had an out of whack root. So, like, take for example with the word to see. In Taino, we have the word arike. The Colonial has arika, and the Garifuna has ariha, all meaning to see, to look. And then from there, we have examples of both the first person D being used and the first person N being used. The most obvious first by Columbus, the document him recording the word ni Taino, and you see variants of the spelling by him and Peter Martier. The Y interchangeable with the I. In Marawa, which I believe is a language related to Baniwa, they have the word ni Tai, meaning my daughter. And that's easily cross-referenced with the word ni Taino, recorded by Columbus, Peter Martier, and Las Casas. So when we pointing to that, what's unfortunate about this is there is no language continuity in the island of Quisqueya today. All we have is like bits and pieces of a language that was once spoken, and that will also include upper and lower Macoris. But the most dominant was the classic Taino, which had an Arawakan root. Now today, the only living Circum-Caribbean language is Garifuna. The Garifuna, they are the only surviving island Arawak language today. In regards to the language, they are the ones that carry the language continuity, because even though the Garifuna, they were exiled from St. Vincent to Honduras, they have the continuity in regards to the language. Something to keep in mind also in regards to the language, words like today, tomorrow, and yesterday. This is something that we don't have in Taino because of the impact of the Spanish conquest. So these words weren't recorded. So with the words that we do have, all points to a relationship with the Colonial. What's unfortunate about the Colonial that there are no more Colonial speakers. The closest to getting to understand Colonial is Garifuna, as they are the only island Arawak speakers. Okay, like the words Aluka for tomorrow in Colonial. The Garifuna has as Haruga. The words for yesterday, according to the women's speech, is the Garifuna has Wurinuga for the women's speech. The Colonial, they have Wurinaka for yesterday. For today, they have the word Ogunye, the Garifuna, for today. The Colonial, they have the word Ikonye, which is actually coming from the Carib word Kohe, which is probably Arawakanized, as we can see. Another point that I want to make is when it comes to understanding those ancestors, they were like any other people. They had both good and bad. One reference we can make is from Raymond Brenton when he talks about the clash between the mainland Carina and Arawakan speakers who originally inhabited the Lesser Antilles, which they make reference as Arawages. Now that's the French adaptation for Arawak. Basil A. Reed, he says the Carina invaders of the Lesser Antilles did not, however, succeed in bringing out a full shift of language among their native wives and descendants. As if we read the book Wild Majesty, it talks about that, how they took Arawak women as wives, and soon after, as we can see mentioned in Douglas Taylor's book, Languages of the West Indies, that this gave rise to a bilingual language, the men speaking the men's language and the women speaking the women's language. And when it comes to the Kalinago, we're mostly interested in the women's speech because this is where we find examples of Island Arawak being used. Now, with that being said, we have been going to the Garifuna, learning from the Garinago community. Garifuna classes started up again, so we're learning from and getting insight from the Garifuna. The Garifuna are much easier to gain access to speak to than the Lokono. The Lokono is a little harder to get insight from them. But the Garinagu is important to learn from because their language is closest to the Kalinago, which is also closest to the Taino. So wrapping this up, all of this is going to be shown and explained through 2 PowerPoints that I'm going to put out soon. And it's just pretty much wrapping up all this information up from a surface level. So this is Peter Muller here. I hope you observe this segment with an open mind and do your own studies. And until the next build, Taino D.